So without further ado, the person who's really helping to sustain and build our movement through his heart, his soul, and his words, Jim Hightower.
Thank you. Thank you, Lisa. Howdy ho, Baraboo. Woo. Thank you so much. What a pluperfect joy to be back here at the Ed Fest with you faithful Barabooians, you feisty fighters for common sense and the common good, you corporate greed whackers and political butt kickers. Always good. And I thank you for allowing a scruffy Texas populace to join you on this sunny day here at the Sauk County Fairgrounds for this 9th edition of the three-ring spectacular Babalooza and all-day hog calling contest that we've got going here. And I want to start my little peroration here by asking you to join me in thanking all of the volunteers who make this happen, led by His Edness, Ed Garvey. Terrific work that these folks do. You know, one thing I really like about Ed is that he understands that battling the bastards is about as much fun as you can have with your clothes on. You know? And who really wants to see Ed naked? I mean, no. So keep battling, Ed, and keep your clothes on, please. That's all that we ask of you. And battle we must. We live in strange times, do we not? Let us explore just a little bit of the strangeness. The Wall Street bankers that Lisa was just talking about who crash our economy, now right back to getting their multi-million-dollar bonuses, while the crashees, the victims of their narcissistic greed, are getting pink slips and eviction notices. And yet we have the bankers themselves saying, no, you should not be condemning us, you should be cheering us, because we are, after all, a charitable group of people. Goldman Sachs, the CEO of which said that he's doing God's work. Goldman Sachs set aside $20 billion this year for bonuses for the top bankers. Yet they said, yeah, we did do that, but we also created a $1 billion pool, a $1 billion charity for some of those crashees. So see, we should be loved. Well, I'm going to tell you a quick story about what the gods think of charity. This is a story that Earl Long used to tell when he was governor of Louisiana. And Earl told a story about a rich man who died and tried to get into heaven. But if you went to the little Methodist church that I did in Denison, Texas, growing up, you know you just don't go into heaven. You've got to appear before the pearly gates, and there's an angel going to review your life. And then St. Peter is going to decide whether you get to come through or not. So here comes this rich man. And the angel looks over his life and said, my God, you never did no good for nobody, no way. What are you doing here? And the rich man said, well, now, that's not entirely true. In 1924, there was a blind beggar man on the street, and I put a nickel in his cup. And the angel said, so? And the rich man said, well, 1935, there was a widow woman on the street. She needed car fare home, and I gave her a nickel. And the angel said, this doesn't make up for a life of greed. And the rich man said, well, now, wait a minute, because I have a consistent pattern of philanthropy. In 1945, I was coming out of my bank. It was Christmas time. There was a Salvation Army kettle, and I put a nickel in there. And so the angel turns back to St. Peter and says, what in the world are we going to do with this man? And St. Peter said, give him back his 15 cents and tell him to go to hell. You see, it's not charity that we want. What we want is economic fairness, social justice, equal opportunity for all people. That's what America stands for. Meanwhile, we've got our wars on. Iraq, we were told just last month, it's over. On August 18th, the last combat division crossed the border from Iraq into Kuwait. Obama himself gave a speech saying it's time to turn the page. Well, I'm sure that Sergeant Brandon Maggart would like to do that, but He can't. He's dead. Sergeant Maggart, 24 years old, from Kirksville, Missouri, he was killed on August 22nd, giving him the distinction of being the first to be killed in action after the war ended. As Lily Tomlin has said, no matter how cynical you get, it's almost impossible to keep up. That war has not ended, and it's not going to end anytime soon. Meanwhile, we've got Afghanistan. Now, can somebody here please tell me, what's the purpose? What's the national interest? What's the strategy? What's the meaning? What the hell is going on? Now, going into the 10th year of this war, the longest war in American history, 1,300 Americans dead, 7,300 grievously wounded. As of yesterday, $331,856,755,497 of our tax dollars have been allocated to this war, adding $7 billion a month to the war in Afghanistan. How many more will die and be wounded? How much more will we be asked to spend? We're told, well, we have to buck up Hamid Karzai's government to create a quasi-stable state there. Well, excuse me, but Hamid Karzai doesn't have a government. He has a kleptocracy. He has a place that ought to be called Corruptistan. If you rolled Tom DeLay, Jack Abramoff, and Bernie Madoff all into one person, that person would be Hamid Karzai. Who wants to die for Karzai? What are we doing? It's time to bring them home. And speaking of killing, this year, BP killed 11 men and caused unfathomable economic and ecological damage in the Gulf of Mexico, while Massey Energy killed 29 mine workers in West Virginia. Yet not one profiteering corporate executive has been charged with a crime, much less done jail time. Speaking of criminals, this January, 5 judicial thugs on the Supreme Court pulled off a black-robed coup on our democracy, decreeing that an inanimate, insentient paper construct called a corporation is a person and is entitled to far more constitutional rights than we actual persons, as Thom Hartmann just laid out. I mean, this puts the dumb in dumbfounding, doesn't it? Yet our elected officials have done nothing to reverse the coup or to impeach the 5 perfidious twerps who betrayed us. Now, here's one that's beyond strange. Democrats are in power in Washington but are unwilling to use it for fear of alienating and angering the Republicans who, excuse me, lost the last election. Democrats in Congress on health care, on Wall Street reform, on jobs, on climate change, on the Supreme Court enthronement of corporations, basically slapping the wrists of the offenders. I've come to believe that it's time for an important step to be taken by the drug corporations in our country. They have a real public service to offer, and I would actually give them antitrust exemption. They can collude to do this. I would like the drug companies to get together and to invent a Viagra that would stiffen the backbones of the Democrats in Congress. We could use tax dollars for that. And I don't mean to be a total downer on this. Thank God for Russ Feingold. Thank God and Wisconsin for Russ Feingold. Meanwhile, across the aisle, the Republicans have decided to throw out their hardcore right-wingers like Murkowski of Alaska and Bennett of Nevada and replace them with hardcore Palinista kooks, just complete bull-goose crazy people. We must kill Social Security, they say. Stop picking on BP, they insist. Stop paying unemployment benefits because it just encourages the unemployed to stop looking for jobs. Keep government out of Medicare, they demand. They're as confused as goats on AstroTurf, you know.